Have you ever found yourself completely captivated by a woman, only to later feel confused, drained, and somehow manipulated? That gnawing feeling in your gut isn't paranoia. It's recognition. Recognition of something Machiavelli understood centuries ago. You see, while you've been playing checkers, she's been playing chess. Today, you're about to discover the hidden architecture of female psychology that no one dares to speak about publicly. The calculated emotional traps that women have perfected over centuries of social evolution. These aren't accidental behaviors. They are deliberate strategies designed to test, weaken, and ultimately dominate. You've felt it before, haven't you? That moment when everything changed in your relationship, when her warm gaze turned cold, when her eager messages became delayed responses, when her passionate interest became casual indifference. You told yourself it was normal, that relationships evolve, that the honeymoon phase always ends. But what if I told you none of it was accidental? Machiavelli wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see, but few can feel. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." This is the essence of the female emotional strategy, creating an appearance that masks the reality. And today, you'll finally understand the game being played around you, with you, and often against you. Why should you care? Because right now, in countless relationships across the world, men are surrendering their emotional sovereignty, their mental peace, and ultimately their power, all because they don't understand the rules of engagement. The solution isn't to become cynical or bitter. The solution is knowledge, understanding. Awareness of these emotional traps will not only protect you but transform how you navigate every relationship in your life. Are you ready to see behind the curtain? To understand what Machiavelli would tell you about female psychology if he were alive today? Let's begin. Before we dive into specific strategies, you need to understand the 3 pillars that support every emotional trap women create. 1. Strategic seduction. 2. Calculated emotional instability. 3. Intermittent reinforcement. These aren't just behaviors, they're sophisticated psychological mechanisms that work together to create emotional dependency. Let's examine each one in detail. Strategic seduction, the perfect illusion. When a woman first sets her sights on you, you'll experience what feels like pure, unbridled affection. She'll shower you with compliments. She'll laugh at your jokes. She'll respond to your messages instantly. She'll show interest in your hobbies, your work, your thoughts. She'll make you feel chosen, special, indispensable. Remember that night she stayed up until 3 a.m. just to hear about your day? Or how she remembered that small detail about your childhood that you mentioned only once? How she made you feel understood in ways no one else ever had? You thought it was love, but Machiavelli would recognize it as strategy. This intense validation isn't simply affection, it's the careful construction of emotional dependency. She's mapping your emotional landscape, identifying your insecurities, your desires, your needs. Every vulnerability you reveal becomes a data point, stored away for future use. You've likely experienced this firsthand. Think about that relationship where the beginning felt too good to be true, because it was. It wasn't sustainable because it wasn't meant to be. It was the foundation being laid for what comes next. And what comes next is where the real strategy begins. Calculated emotional instability, the power of uncertainty. Once she's established emotional primacy in your mind, once you've grown accustomed to her validation, her attention, her consistency, she will begin the second phase, withdrawal. Suddenly, her texts take hours to be answered. Her interest in your stories seems to wane. Her affection becomes unpredictable. Some days she's the woman you fell for. Other days she's practically a stranger. You find yourself checking your phone more frequently. You start analyzing your behavior, wondering what you did wrong. You begin to adjust yourself, your words, your actions, your very personality, to try to recapture what you had before. This isn't coincidence. This is calculation. By creating emotional instability, she accomplishes several strategic objectives simultaneously. 1. She generates anxiety in you, keeping you mentally occupied with the relationship too. She establishes herself as the prize to be won rather than the pursuer. 3. She conditions you to work harder for her attention. 4. She creates a scarcity mindset where her affection becomes more valuable because it's less available. Think about a recent relationship. Did you notice how her behavior changed once she felt secure in your interest? How the woman who once couldn't get enough of you suddenly had other priorities. How you went from being the center of her world to just another part of it. That's this strategy in action. And it works because most men misinterpret what's happening. You think it's a natural evolution of the relationship. You think it's her getting comfortable. You think it's normal. Machiavelli would tell you, the promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. The warmth she showed was necessary to secure your emotional investment. The withdrawal is necessary to capitalize on it. But this is only the second act in a 3-act performance. Intermittent reinforcement, the addiction protocol. Just when you've started to adapt to her emotional distance, just when you're considering whether to stay or leave, she returns. The warmth comes back. The affection resurfaces. The woman you fell for reappears and relief washes over you. You think, finally, we're back on track. But it doesn't last. Soon enough, the coldness returns. The cycle repeats. Warmth, withdrawal, warmth, withdrawal. Each time with slightly different timing, slightly different triggers, making it impossible to predict. This isn't relationship turbulence. This is intermittent reinforcement, the most powerful behavioral conditioning tool known to psychology. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The unpredictable nature of the reward creates a much stronger addiction than consistent rewards ever could. In psychology experiments, rats will press a lever that delivers food pellets at random intervals far more obsessively than one that delivers food regularly. You've become that laboratory rat, pressing the lever of effort, attention, and emotional investment, never knowing when the reward of her affection will come, but unable to stop trying. This creates a psychological dependency more powerful than any drug. 1. Your brain releases dopamine during the reward phases, creating genuine chemical addiction. 2. The unpredictability keeps you in a constant state of anticipation. 3. The intermittent nature prevents you from giving up hope. 4. The contrast between her warmth and coldness makes the warm periods feel even more rewarding. Think about your most intense relationships. Were they the ones with the most consistent partners? Or the ones with partners who ran hot and cold? The ones where you always knew where you stood? Or the ones where you were constantly trying to figure out what was happening? For most men, the relationships that consumed them most completely were the ones with the most unpredictable emotional patterns. As Machiavelli observed, men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions. The immediate need here is emotional validation, and the intermittent nature of its delivery ensures you'll keep seeking it, regardless of the cost. The emotional tests, measuring your breaking points beyond these 3 foundational strategies. Women employ specific tactical tests designed to measure your emotional resilience, your boundaries, and ultimately, your value as a partner. You've experienced these tests, even if you didn't recognize them as such. The jealousy test. She mentions another man, perhaps a coworker, an ex-I, or a friend. She observes your reaction carefully. Does jealousy flare immediately, revealing insecurity? Do you remain calm, projecting confidence? Do you become controlling, revealing possessiveness? Your response tells her exactly how emotionally dependent you've become and how much power she has over you. Remember that time she casually mentioned getting drinks with a male colleague, or how she lingered on a story about an ex-boyfriend? That wasn't casual conversation. That was reconnaissance. The priority test. She cancels plans last minute. She makes you wait. She becomes unavailable during times she knows are important to you. This isn't poor planning. It's a deliberate assessment of where she ranks in your hierarchy of priorities. Will you rearrange your entire schedule to accommodate her? Will you express disappointment but maintain your boundaries? Will you let it slide again and again? Your response determines how much of yourself you're willing to sacrifice for her approval. The support test. She creates or amplifies a personal crisis and monitors your response. How quickly do you come to her aid? How much comfort do you provide? How many resources, emotional, financial, temporal, are you willing to deploy? This isn't just seeking support, it's measuring the extent of your servitude. The independence test. She pulls away completely for a period. No explanation, no timeline for return, just absence. This isn't needing space, it's calculating your dependence. Will you chase immediately? Will you move on easily? Will you respect her independence while maintaining your own? Your reaction reveals whether you've maintained your autonomy or surrendered it entirely. Each of these tests serves a dual purpose. They provide information about your emotional makeup while simultaneously strengthening her position of power in the relationship. And here's what most men don't realize. You're being tested constantly, in ways both subtle and overt. Every interaction contains elements of assessment. Every reaction you provide is filed away, building a complete profile of your psychological triggers, weaknesses, and breaking points. The language of emotional manipulation beyond behavioral strategies. Women employ specific linguistic patterns designed to maintain emotional control. Future projection. When we move in together, when we have kids, when we grow old together, these seemingly affectionate projections serve a strategic purpose. They create a psychological commitment in your mind without requiring any actual commitment from her. They plant the seeds of a future that may never materialize but keep you invested in the relationship. Retroactive reframing. I never said that. That's not what happened. You're remembering it wrong. This linguistic strategy subtly alters your perception of reality, making you question your own memory and judgment. Over time, this creates a dependence on her version of events, rather than your own perception. Emotional invalidation. You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. Why are you making this such a big deal? These phrases serve to delegitimize your emotional responses, ensuring that her emotional reality dominates the relationship landscape. After enough invalidation, you begin to suppress your authentic reactions, defaulting to whatever emotional response will maintain peace. Comparative devaluation. My ex would always, other men usually, most guys would appreciate. These comparisons serve to create an insecurity loop, where you're constantly measuring yourself against an invisible standard. It shifts the power dynamic by positioning her as the judge of your worth relative to other men. Have you noticed these patterns in your conversations? The way certain phrases seem designed to leave you feeling slightly off balance? Slightly uncertain? Slightly inadequate? That's because they are. As Machiavelli noted, words are the shadows of actions. In emotional manipulation, the words themselves are the actions. Actions designed to shape your reality. Now we arrive at the most sophisticated emotional trap, what I call the sovereignty transfer. This is the culmination of all the previous strategies, the point where a man surrenders his emotional sovereignty completely. And it happens so subtly that most men never realize it's occurred until long after the fact. Here's how it unfolds. Through the consistent application of strategic seduction, calculated emotional instability, and intermittent reinforcement, a woman creates a relationship dynamic where your emotional state becomes entirely dependent on her behavior. When she's warm, you're happy. When she's cold, you're anxious. When she's approving, you're confident. When she's critical, you're insecure. Your internal emotional thermostat is no longer under your control, it's under hers. This is the ultimate Machiavellian victory, the complete capture of your emotional autonomy. And once this sovereignty transfer is complete, several profound shifts occur in the relationship. 1. Reality distortion. You begin to perceive the relationship through her eyes rather than your own. Her interpretation of events becomes your interpretation. Her priorities become your priorities. Her grievances become your guilt. 2. Value inversion. The natural value dynamic of the relationship inverts. Rather than both parties bringing value and receiving value in return, You find yourself constantly working to prove your worth while simultaneously overvaluing everything she provides. 3. Identity erosion. Parts of your personality that don't serve her interests or that generate her disapproval begin to atrophy. Your independent friendships wane. Your personal hobbies receive less attention. Your distinctive traits become muted. 4. Emotional hostage situation. You reach a state where leaving the relationship feels impossible, not because of love, but because your entire emotional infrastructure is now built around her responses. The prospect of withdrawal creates genuine psychological panic. You've experienced elements of this before, haven't you? That relationship where you gradually lost yourself, where your friends commented that you seemed different, where decisions that would have been simple before became weighted with considerations of her reaction. That wasn't love, that was sovereignty transfer. And here's the most insidious part. Unlike physical coercion, which is obvious and external, emotional sovereignty transfer feels internal and voluntary. You believe these changes are your choice, your growth, your natural evolution within the relationship. Machiavelli understood this principle perfectly. The best fortress is to be found in the love of the people, for although you may have fortresses, they will not save you if you are hated by the people. In relationship terms, no matter how strong you are individually, if you surrender your emotional sovereignty, that strength becomes irrelevant. You've given away the fortress keys. This is the trap that Machiavelli would recognize instantly. The exchange of real power for the illusion of love. Now that you've seen behind the curtain, now that you understand the architecture of these emotional traps, what do you do with this knowledge? First, recognize that awareness itself is power. The strategies I've described work primarily because they operate below the threshold of consciousness. Once you can name them, once you can identify them in real time, their effectiveness diminishes dramatically. Second, reclaim your emotional sovereignty. This doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. It means establishing an internal emotional foundation that exists independent of any relationship. Your happiness, your confidence, your sense of self. These must be generated from within, not outsourced to another person. Third, recognize these patterns early. The initial phases of strategic seduction, the love bombing, the mirroring, the immediate intimacy, should trigger caution rather than celebration. Authentic connection builds gradually. Strategic connection is manufactured rapidly. Fourth, maintain your boundaries, your friendships, your interests, and your independent identity within relationships. These aren't just pleasant aspects of a balanced life, they're your insurance policy against emotional capture. Finally, understand that this knowledge doesn't make genuine connection impossible. Quite the opposite. By recognizing the architecture of manipulation, you create space for authentic relationships built on mutual respect rather than strategic control. Machiavelli wrote, "Where the willingness is great, the difficulties cannot be great." With willingness to see clearly, to maintain your sovereignty, and to engage authentically, the difficulties of navigating relationships diminish considerably. You've spent enough time as a pawn in someone else's game. It's time to become the strategist of your own emotional life. So tell me, how many of these patterns have you recognized in your past relationships? Has this opened your eyes to dynamics you felt but couldn't name? Comment below with your experiences. Like this video if it provided clarity you've been seeking. Subscribe to the channel for more truths that others are afraid to speak. And don't forget to check our previous videos that reveal the other hidden dynamics at play in your relationships. The knowledge is yours now. What will you do with it?